Hi guys, I hope you're well and I hope you're good. Welcome to TS Tutoring, and today we are starting a new chapter. We are focusing on exothermic and endothermic reactions, right? So we will be talking about exothermic and endothermic reaction. What's the difference between these two reactions, right? Now, when we talk about this kind of reactions, we are focusing on heat, right? You see there that we are focusing on heat, right? Exo and endothermic reactions. These are reactions, right? They depend on heat. Well, the other one will take in heat, the other one will give off heat. So we want to know what's the difference between them and how do they relate with heat. Remember, for a reaction, we need to have reactants, right? So we have reactant A and B. They react together to form AB, right? Which is our product. Now, what kind of a reaction is this? Is it an endothermic or an exothermic reaction, right? So let's first start off by defining what is an exothermic reaction. So now, an exothermic reaction, when you see the word ex or exo, think of exit, right? Ex, think of exit or external, right? With this type of reaction, this is a reaction in which it's a reaction in which heat is given off, right? This reaction releases heat, right? A reaction in which heat is released. Remember, exit, X for exit. So when you exit, you're going out, right? So heat is going out in this type of a reaction, right? So with this type of reactions, you will see that the heat is released. Most of the time, you will come across something like this, a triangle and an H. This is called heat of a reaction. This triangle, right? It's heat of reaction. Now, the heat of reaction for an exothermic, because the heat is released, is going to be negative, right? But I will show you the equation that we will use to determine the heat of the reaction, right? So, what about an endo? What is an endothermic reaction? You know, when we talk about thermic, when you see thermic, think of thermal, right? Thermal, right? Heat. Thermal talks about heat, right? So thermic, we know it's heat. But what about heat? X, heat goes off. And so En, when you look at En for endo, you think about enter. Ex, exit. En, we are enter, right? So we are entering. The heat is entering, right? So this is a type of reaction in which heat, this reaction actually uses heat, right? So heat enters the system, right? So the surroundings, they give heat to the system which is the reaction, right? So basically, reactants absorb, in this reaction, the reactants will absorb heat from the surrounding. Okay, let's go here. From the surrounding, right? But with exothermic, the reactants or the reaction will give off heat to the surrounding. Here, endothermic, En for enter, the reactant will absorb. When you absorb heat, you are taking in heat. From where? From the surroundings, isn't it? So we will be dealing with this kind of thing or an equation. So the heat of the reaction is the energy of the product minus the energy of the reactant, right? You will see when we show you a graph. But what you need to know is that we have two types of reactions, right? Endothermic reaction and exothermic reaction. Exothermic reaction, these are reactions in which the heat is given off or is released to the surroundings, right? So X stands for exit. The heat exit the reaction, right? It goes to the surrounding. Endo, the EN stands for enter. The heat is coming from the surrounding and is entering the reaction. Therefore, the reactant will absorb heat from the surroundings, right? So let's talk more about this, the heat of the reaction. Remember, EH stands for heat of, not EH, delta H, heat of reaction. So we want to be able to talk about the heat of the reaction of exothermic reaction and endothermic reaction. So basically, before I continue, a type of a reaction for exothermic reaction, what would you think about? Which reaction comes to your mind when heat is released? Which type of reaction will give off heat, right? So let's think about it. How about fire? How about when you burn wood, right? So fire, if you're burning wood, the surrounding will do what? It will become hot. That's why we make fire in winter, and the surrounding becomes hot, and then you find 10 people around the fire, right? We are becoming warm. Heat is coming from the reaction to the surrounding, and it keeps us warm. So fire, when you're burning wood, it's a type of exothermic reaction. How about endothermic reaction? Why? What comes to your mind? Which reaction will absorb heat, right? So let's think about ice. How about ice, right? How about ice? Well, what happens when ice melt? If you take an ice cube, you put it on the sun, it's going to absorb heat from the sun, from the surrounding. And then what is it going to do? It's going to melt to form a liquid, isn't it? So that's an example of an endothermic reaction, right? You can also think about baking. Those who like to bake, if you bake cookies or bread, we put those cookies or bread in the oven. The oven will supply heat to the bread. Then the reaction will take place, and then you will see your cookies, then or your space muffins, they become big, isn't it? You like space muffins, I know. So yeah, let's talk about now. Let's talk about the graphs, right? So in this chapter, you will learn about the graphs, right? We have a graph for an exothermic reaction and an endothermic reaction. What's the difference? Now, the energy of the in exothermic reaction, because heat is being given off, right? The energy of the reactions is higher than the energy of the product. Let's see what's going to happen. Remember, this is a graph. Let's say this was 0. Let's say this is 1. This is 2. Now, if you look at it, R stands for reaction, reactants, P for products, right? So the difference between R, the energy of reactants and product, this is our heat of reaction, delta H, the energy released. So let's calculate delta H here. Energy of product, remember, let's say we said is 1, minus what? Minus 2. Then our heat of reaction would be what? Negative 1, right? I think it should be joules, right? It should be joules because it's energy. So for an exothermic reaction, we have a negative heat of reaction because energy of reactants is higher than energy of product. What about endothermic? Endothermic energy of reactant is lower than energy of product. If this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. If you look at it, now it's going to be what? 3 minus 1. 3 minus 1 is 2 joules. Now it's a positive 2. Now the energy in endothermic reaction, it should be positive. Heat of reaction is positive. In exothermic, heat of reaction is negative. Always, don't forget that. These are the graphs you need to know. These graphs, remember them. The difference between the energy of product and reaction and energy of reaction, this arrow is the energy absorbed. So this reaction will absorb 2 joules and it's positive energy. Positive because it's coming in, negative because it's going out. This reaction will release negative 1 joule of energy because it's going out. Energy is released, right? Now let's talk about this, the difference between the two. So the type of reaction, exothermic and endothermic. How about the energy? What's going on with the energy? Is the energy absorbed or released? Well, in exothermic, energy is released. In endothermic, energy is absorbed. What about the energy of reactants and product? Well, in exothermic, like I showed you in the graph, the reactants will have higher energy than product, right? While, okay, let's confirm this statement. We're talking about the graph, right? In exothermic reaction, reactants have higher energy than products. Energy of reactants is greater than of products. In endothermic, energy of reactant is less than of product, right? Look at reactant is 1, while product is 3, isn't it? What about the sign of delta H? Well, in exothermic is negative. The heat of reaction is negative, while in endothermic is positive. Why? Negative endothermic, exothermic, while positive exothermic. So guys, that's all for today. We will do more videos based on this chapter as time goes on. I hope you enjoyed this video and it helps you out, right? So signing out from said T. Remember, follow us on TS Tutoring, TikTok, YouTube, subscribe TS Tutoring, and all the best, guys.